Hi guys, happy Monday. Excuse me. I still have the stuff. I don't know. I feel fine. And hopefully my reading voice is going to be good because I've got lots of reading to do today for you, to you. Thank you, Druid. Hey, Mara Dim. Hey, Robin. Yes, absolutely. People in Southern California, I had to stop watching the news. I feel so terrible, and people just utter devastation. Yeah, East Coast. Honestly, does a week go by that there isn't some kind of horribleness? Yeah, and I think I was talking to Jill yesterday, and we were, talking about just, I guess, general disasters and the things that people want to blame forest fires on. It's ridiculous. I'm not going to get into that. I hope you guys had a good weekend. It was very busy for me. I was working on a project, so I got very little sewing done. Although on Saturday, Jill and I did a stitch and glitch, so I got a tiny bit of sewing done. I'm terrible with the stitch and glitch things because I just want to talk. And then I'm like, oh, I haven't been stitching, just talk. So needless to say, I wasn't super productive with creating anything textile oriented, but a project that I'm working on, got a big chunk of it done. So pat me on the back. Of course, I'd been procrastinating on some of it. So, but anyway, productive weekend in a different way, but that's okay. So today, what I have for you, I actually did get some late night reading done. And first of all, the reading I didn't get done, The Dress Diary of Mrs. Ann Sykes. We are starting it this week on Quilt Nerding. I have not gotten that reading done, but I think it'll go pretty fast. So if you're interested, join us. Jill's got links out there. I'm not going to share the links right now unless, Druid, you have time. It's not a big deal. But this is the British copy. The U.S. copy looks a little bit different, but this is what we're starting to read for our first quarter book. It's going to take us a while because, it's a reasonably thick book. Not a whole lot of pictures. It's narrative. But I'm really excited about this one. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, check into Quilt Nerding and read this with us. I'm super excited about it. My mom's reading it with us. It'll be fun. So the book that I did some reading. Oh, don't worry about it, Druid. It's the Quilt Nerding YouTube links. Jill puts all the links to everything in there. I trust that everybody here today can find it. But if you do want the link, just type in the chat and Druid or I will find it. So I think a lot of you already have the book, so it's no big deal. Jill yells at me when I don't mention important things. I guess I should probably mention some of the things we have coming up. Oh, thanks, Druid. Some of the things we have coming up. So is it this coming weekend or is it next weekend? I have to look at the calendar. So I think it's next weekend. The 25th is Tea and Textiles with Caroline at the Schwenkfelder. Hey, Jill. It's an online thing, Zoom. It's 3 lectures and a mini lecture, and you can purchase each of the lectures separately or you can purchase all 3 of them together. Our friend Dawn Ronigan is doing one of the lectures, and their theme this year is rock, paper, scissors, which is kind of cool because Dawn does a piece about scissors, antique scissors, and because she's the needlework tools guru. And then somebody else is doing paper samplers, and I got the paper sampler paper not long ago. I showed it, and it's paper with little tiny holes, and you can do cross stitch on it. So somebody will be doing a presentation about that. And then rock is represented by palimpores, which are a type of, I don't know what you call them. They're not a quilt, I don't think. They're not a bedspread, I don't think. They are a textile that comes out of India, and I don't know anything about them. I've heard the word. I think I've seen one. But I'm excited about that because it's a subject I really don't know anything about. So I will be there on the 25th. Hopefully you can join it too. Again, quilt nerding. We share all those links. I'm terrible about links here, but Jill, if you want to share them, you can. And then the end of the month, the 31st, 1st, and 2nd, we've got winter virtual seminar with AQSG. And I have been working on that. Jill's been working on it. So it's a Zoom event. It is available to both AQSG members and the general public. General public pays a teeny bit more for each of the events. But I think there are a couple of free things and some other cool stuff. Like we've got some virtual museum visits, just some really neat stuff. And, if it's something like you've been thinking about AQSG or you just kind of want to see what it's about, check in on it and, pick one of the sessions or the museum tours or something that sounds interesting to you and just check it out. Just a recommendation. Yes, I did mention tea and textiles. I think I was mentioning that as you were logging in. So, thank you. Thank you, ma'am. So you heard me say it. That's why you're, you guys are the best. So that's the big stuff. The one thing I do have to mention, let's see if I can grab my link here, is our private movie screening. We're going to look at Taking Venice. It is a little documentary that came out, I think it was mid last year, I think. So it's a new documentary. And it is about the 1964 Venice Biennale where Robert Rauschenberg took the grand prize. And there's some scandal. Apparently it was a manufactured situation from what I understand. So I don't know anything about it. I have not watched this documentary. I've purchased it so we can watch it. But it's going to be a private event because copyright. And I want to do fun stuff for subscribers. So you need to be a subscriber of this channel. And it will be on Valentine's Day evening. And if you, unlike myself, will be doing something fun for Valentine's Day with a significant other, with your sweetheart, don't worry. You can still register for it. I'll send you the link and then I'll leave it up for, I don't know, a week or so that you can circle back and watch it later on. So for that, let me put the link in the chat and I'll keep reminding you guys, but what I'm asking you to do with this link is just give me your information that you want an invitation to this private event, and that, share with me your Twitch handle, so that I know you're subscribed and then you're good to go. So I'm putting that in there. You have until like February 13th to do this. So no rush, but I'll keep mentioning it. And it'll be fun. So I hope that some of the lurkers will come, and you never have to talk and chat if you don't want to, but, I hope we'll have a big crowd for that and it'll be fun. So put that on your calendar. And, Valentine's Day, I think Valentine's Day is fun, in terms of like the stuff we used to do in school, like Valentine's, giving, heart candies and stuff. The stress of it being like a romantic holiday, I don't love. But I love the idea of like a Galentine's Day or Palentine's Day. So that's what it'll be about, just hanging out with friends, and all that, chocolates and cupids and stuff. All right. So what I have for you today, I said, When Art Meets Money. I got this book. It was a total whim. I was like, I want to find something that is maybe, what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of a neutral look at Art Basel. I've talked about Art Basel a bit. My first recent kind of deep thoughts about it, because I knew what it was. I didn't care much about it because it's like, rich people art stuff. But the reason why it really kind of came, in my consciousness recently is because there is a woman on Instagram, Carrie Scott. She posted a reel about Art Basel and all of the fiber arts that were there this past year was December when they do Art Basel Miami. Art Basel is in a number of cities internationally. But the one in the US is in Miami, and it was in December, early December. And I was like, fiber arts. And she has this whole idea of like, well, is this just a whim? Is this just a trend? Or is this the real deal? So I really started thinking about Art Basel and, thinking about how does one get in there? And I kind of briefly talked about the other day, as an artist, you don't get into Art Basel. You don't, you're not sending your portfolio to anybody. You're not requesting, inclusion, whatever. It's the galleries that get into Art Basel. And if you are represented by a gallery, then you yourself might get into Art Basel. If you're not represented by a gallery, forget about it. That's just the way it is. So what this book is about is it was a research project by a group in Germany, and the university is St. Gallen. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's spelled Gallen, but I think that's Galen. This book was written in 2015. So I don't want to say, the commentary in here, take it with a grain of salt. Not at all. But we have to remember 2015 was before the pandemic. Life was just a little bit different 10 years ago, or 9 years and a month ago. So, some of this, I don't know how it may have shifted and changed. Honestly, rich people are still rich despite the pandemic and the economy. So maybe nothing's changed with Art Basel. This book was a little bit hard to get through. And crud, there was one person I wanted to look up and I totally forgot to do it. But excuse me. It's a translated book. It's a research project. And I think they did a really incredible job with it. They've pulled in a bunch of stuff from different sources. They've got kind of quick snippets of interviews. But my challenge with this book, and maybe somebody who has a little bit more experience with academia can clue me in on kind of how to look at this. I don't know if it's the translation. Excuse me. All right, cough. You can't keep this up. But, or maybe it's the fact that this was written in German and it's by a German research group. But I don't know if this is going to show it very well. But you can see there are a lot of quotations in this particular paragraph. There's a lot of this all over this book, like the quote marks. And in some cases, really hard to read because of all the quotation marks. And again, I don't know how much of this is because of the translation or because, they specifically wrote it this way. In any event, one of the other things I think that is kind of frustrating to me is, there's 4 people involved. Franz Schultheis, Erwin Single, Stefan Egger, and Thomas Mazzarana. They're the 4 people that worked on this project. And as you're reading through the narratives, there will be something to the effect of, my grandfather was a collector. And it's like, well, who are you? Because there's no, each of these kind of little, I don't know, these snippets, some of them are headings. They're not exactly, so there are chapters and then there's headings. In any event, there's no reference to who said these things. There are references as far as when they've pulled something off of a website or a quote, they kind of have that information here. Anyway, it's a little bit of a challenge. And so I do want to say I will, as I'm going to read some pieces from here, I'm going to try to, I think there's only 1 or 2 quotes I can really give an attribution to because I just don't know other than these people. So that said, I read one of these quotes to Jill and she said, I need you to put that up on the screen. So, Jill, this is for you. I'm putting this up on the screen so that you can view it as I talk about it. So, Pierre Bourdieu, this is my boo-boo. I meant to look him up. I think he's a sociologist. He is a person who has written about these concepts. He wrote a book called The Rules of Art and Love of Art, I think. And then It Sounds Like Sociology in Question, I think, is a book also. And the other interesting thing is these 4 people, these researchers, 2 of them are involved with like the Pierre Bourdieu Institute or something. So this guy must be somebody important in Europe. Was not familiar to me, but so here's the quote. The particular difficulty of sociology comes from the fact that it teaches things everybody knows in a way, but which they don't want to know or cannot know because the law of the system is to hide those things from them. So wrap your head around that for a minute. So Jill says his work is used a lot in anthropology. Yeah, I mean, I'm pretty sure he's a sociologist, right? Like, and I'm really interested to look at his writing, and more extensively, because he has written at least 2 things specifically about art, and they seem to really draw from his writing. So he seems to be a very astute individual. But, think about this. And I think this obviously is really pointing to, okay, so Jill read a lot of his work when she was in college. Yeah. So this is specifically about Art Basel, but think of all of the things in our world these days that, everybody kind of knows, but it's a little bit obscure. I don't know. The U.S. government sometimes feels this way. I don't know. But I think this is a really good, quote about Art Basel, like, and just about the big A art world in general. Like we know intuitively it's for rich people. It's not for us. It's, it's got a system or a process that we are not meant to know. Unless you're involved. And even when you are involved, sometimes it's a mystery. Bianca, oh gosh, why am I drawing a blank on her name? She is a fantastic writer. She's a journalist. Let me look her name up very quickly because I want to. Bianca Bosker. I knew it was something with a B. So she wrote a book called Get the Picture. And she had an experience at Art Basel that I thought was very, very enlightening. She talked about she was working with the gallery as they were getting, I want to say it was their first Art Basel. So she had this really interesting experience just as, an average person who knows nothing about art. That's why she went into writing this book. So I have read you that quote. I want to read you a couple of other things out of here. Got lots of things. Make sure I didn't miss one. Okay, so we've read the quote by Pierre Bourdieu. Okay, this one, the heading of this is called On the Glory of Wastefulness, the Distinguishing Mark of Art. Now, this is one of the sections that kind of bugs me because there's like a first person narrative in here, but I don't know who wrote this section. So it could have been any one of these 4 people. So it says, of all the luxury goods, works of art are the purest form of uselessness, of purposelessness, expenditure, of economic wastefulness in its socially most distinctive shape. Access to them requires substantial material and cultural resources, means which are extremely unequally distributed in society and, in their combination, have become the privilege of a tiny minority. Originally, the collection of art was a part of elegant life, of the savoir-vivre, of the tradition-conscious social elite, of the nobility and the upper bourgeoisie, which surrounded itself with works of art as a matter of course, without needing to pursue a conscious practice of self-glorification. Its love of art manifested itself as an apparently spontaneous expression of a cultivated lifestyle. I mean, when we think about the salons of, the 19th century, and I guess probably 18th century too, 16th century maybe, or 17th century maybe, probably. And I just picture those, like, I've been to the Habsburg Palace, And like there's whole rooms that they're salon rooms, and they literally have art from like hanging, a couple feet from the ground, like 2 or 3 feet from the ground, all the way up to the ceiling. And you just like look at, and they're all with this like Baroque kind of um, frames and just encrusted. And there's so much of it, like you can't exactly like zoom in on any one thing. There are like lots of portraits and still lifes and things. That's what I picture here, that the elite, the nobles, the royalty, like that's what I think of when I think of like old timey kind of stuff. And so really you kind of have to ask, how's it any different now? It's just the room looks different because it is the 21st century and not the 19th century or before. The owner of a French art consultancy agency, himself an art lover, nostalgically recalls. Oh, actually, I probably should have done a better job of skimming this because they're quoting somebody, not themselves. Bad job, Cake. Bad job. Okay, so this French art consultancy guy says, I have been sensitive to art since my childhood. My grandfather was a collector, but in the sense of the word at that time. One did not speak of collectors, but of art lovers. The term collector was pejorative. Like, for example, a stamp collector, because God forbid that a stamp collector would put themselves in the same atmosphere as art collectors. The art lover was a man with a vision who lived with his objects. He had his own point of view, be it about his paintings, his furniture, or his tapestries, etc. The view of art was not simply oriented on a discipline. It encompassed a much wider perspective. One could say the fine arts. He was an art lover with a beautiful collection, but he regarded it as a lifestyle. So, yeah, the lifestyle of art lover / art collector, that's different than those of us that just go to museums to look at stuff, right? Okay, so the second paragraph. In the age of an unchallenged social elite, art was an expression of the art of living, of the ability to make one's own life, a total work of art, in quotes, a sign of true noblesse. The possession of a work of art was not only an indication of economic wealth, but also of a good taste. And in the consciousness of this class, it was detached from its material and social preconditions. For just this reason, there was something normative about this manner of seeing art. A genuine collector, an expression used again and again in the conversations at the Art Basel, a genuine collector, is cultivated. Anyone who wishes to buy culture should himself possess culture, as a big art collector from Switzerland put it. But precisely this equation opens up the possibilities for the fulfillment of social pretensions. Anyone who buys art can hope to acquire the insignia of cultivatedness in return for his money. Thanks to their collectively attributed authority, symbolical goods, above all works of art, bestow social recognition on their owners. But what is the basis for this specific power of art? So it's basically saying, you can have art, you can buy culture with art, but you should already be cultured. You can't buy art without culture. So if you're trying to become cultured by buying art, you're barking up the wrong tree, because you can't buy culture by buying art. You already have to be cultured. And so one thing I do like about this book is there's actually a lot of pictures, and some of them are sort of, I don't know, for instance, like this. We've just got this Hulk inflatable item, which must have been a piece of an artwork. But then in other cases, you see like people wheeling and dealing or whatever it is they're doing. This guy in the red pants. He's an art lover. Okay, so this passage is called An Exclusive Passion, Social Rationalities of the Irrational. At first sight, particularly when it is nourished by the medial presentation for a broader public, the world of the art collector seems to be highly homogeneous and closed. The essential precondition for membership, the admission ticket for this exclusive circle, is quite simply the availability of the necessary wealth, of substantial purchasing power, The spectacular reports on report record on ugh. The spectacular reports on record prices for works of art at auctions and art fairs, which are again and again surpassed, regularly call this to mind. Excuse me. You guys. Big collections can only be had for this price. Someone who flies into Switzerland, and remember, Art Basel, the original Art Basel, is in Switzerland. This isn't just Miami. This is probably more about Switzerland. So someone who flies into Switzerland on a private airplane from the USA, Brazil, Southeast Asia, or the Emirates. I mean, thinking the UAE, people coming from the UAE probably come in a plane made of money or gold or oil or all three. So any of those people who fly on a private airplane for the opening day of the Art Basel is picked up at the airport by a limousine with a chauffeur and taken to the fair, relaxes in a VIP lounge, and contributes to the annual assessment of the Art Basel as a great financial success, is part of a small planetary elite, and participates in the aura intended for it. The art world is very small. This is the characterization of her milieu by a well-known Zurich art collector. Her American colleague estimated that this exclusive circle amounted to about several hundred persons worldwide in the 1980s. Several hundred persons. 30 years later, this rare species had, in his opinion, increased at least tenfold. But even on this estimate, the world of the collectors would still be overseeable and exclusive enough. So even if it's a couple of thousand people, I do a little math in my head. Yeah. So yeah, I mean, this is just they're really recognizing the fact that, you know, this is like Wall Street. These aren't day traders. These are like the Lehman Brother bros, right? Here's another picture, which I know is probably not going to be able to see very well, but it's interesting that they have this wine called Ruinart. It's spelled Ruinart. And I think that's funny. I'm sure the name is like, you know, it must be some European thing, but it's kind of hilarious that it's ruin art, because that seems to be what Art Basel does for your average person. Ruin art for us. And what's really funny is, so this little picture, it says, Ruinart Blanc de Blanc is $7.50. And I don't know what denomination this, I'm assuming it's euros because we're talking about Switzerland here. So 7.5 euros is at least in the tens of dollars, in the teens of dollars. So anyway, and rosé, all of these Ruinart rosé, and then there's some other brands here. They're not cheap. Sparkling water, mineral water, 5 euros. So the point being here that this stuff is expensive. Sparkling apple juice, 5 euros. But I read on Reddit, and again, remember, this is 10 years ago. So I read on Reddit that a glass of wine now, like in Miami, the Miami Art Basel, was like something absurd. Like, I don't know, $20 or $30 for a glass of wine or champagne. And then I want to say somebody talked about buying, I want to say a mixed drink at a special event, and they paid like $45 for it. I'm like, are you kidding me? For $45, I better get like a full pitcher of margaritas, all you can eat, like chips and salsa, an entree, and a dessert. That is ridiculous. Because you know, they didn't probably even pay nearly that much for the bottle of wine, whatever it was. So, or the bottle of spirits. So I just wanted to point that out, that, you know, this isn't just about buying expensive art. This is also about, you know, it's a fair. So they have things like food stands and places where you can buy drinks, but it's not going to be like going to the county fair or your state fair. You're not going to be able to get, fried Oreos for $7. You're going to have to pay $30 for them. So, okay. So this next thing that I looked at it's called Quality Meets Commerce Without Surprises. And then the next section is called Unique, Exciting, Nice, and Interesting. So this is the difference between what artists had to say and what just the general public had to say. So I will read these to you. Which road would you say? It's better to have some olives and a rotisserie chicken stand. Yes, one of those Bloody Marys that's got an entire meal jammed on top of it. I love those. Yeah, they're so, I don't know, gimmicky, but yeah, like who cares about the Bloody Mary? It better have a whole salad, some cocktail wieners, some pepperoni, some olives. Yeah, totally agree with you. Okay, so this picture was pretty funny. I love this. Shrimp, yes. Please do not touch. I don't know what is happening here in this piece of art. It looks like a kiddie pool full of like colored whipped cream or something. I don't know. So these are some of the quotes from artists. It is like any other art fair I have visited. Okay. Same as other years in terms of the art shown. Important cultural event. Conversations had the most educational value. I find that the fair itself is often overwhelming as the crowds of people increase. It is sometimes difficult to enjoy or appreciate the art. Now, this one was not an artist. This person is a development coordinator in a museum. They're from the U.S., Alabama. So this is another development agent at an auction house, and they said, had fun, saw some nice things, but despite being overwhelming, everybody says it's overwhelming, and I think it's just super crowded, like on the public days. Despite being overwhelming, due to the masses of people, the sensory overload, and the whirlwind of events, it was somewhat underwhelming in terms of seeing new, exciting material that makes you think. Now, this is a person who is an agent in an auction house. So, these are the kind of people that sell the art or put the art in a museum. So you kind of like the fact that they're saying it's hard to appreciate this. And they're there to look at art, because they're going to be obtaining art for whatever reason. So this person's a publicist. It was fine. It's always okay. I always hope to see something different at the major fair circuit, which for me remains Art Basel Miami, Armory, Art Basel, and Frieze. I'm not sure what they mean there. And feel that there is a lot of repetition among them. Repetition, yes. When we show the same batch of painters over and over, then indeed it gets repetitive. Okay, now this is a journalist. High class fair which fulfills its purpose. Little that is new, but nevertheless pleasure in looking at the works. Okay, now we're back to artists. Too commercial, too few surprises. Good quality, but few surprises. Lovely works. All right, this is actually, interestingly, a younger artist. Lovely works, a lot of variety, but everything is moved and impulsed by money. Art is supposed to be activated by questions and self-reflection, and I see lots of dollar signs involved. This person's a typographer, a gathering of snobs. And then finally, a gallery employee / artist. A lot of short-lived kitsch, some works of high artistic quality. So in general, people that are like working in like either artists or working hardcore in the art industry, these are the things they had to say. Now, let's look at the general public. And we also have their professions. So this first one, loved it! Exclamation point. Software engineer from Miami. Fantastic, wide-ranging. That's a bookseller. Unique. That's an assistant manager. Assistant manager of what? I don't know. Sensational. That was a lawyer. Fantastic, keep it happening. That's a health advisor. Okay, BFD. I don't know about an okra. I'm gonna have to do without an okra in my Bloody Mary, but banana peppers, yes, those are good. um, Exhilarating, beautiful, stimulating. An insurance agent. I liked it. Attorney. Lots of attorneys here. Oh yes, a deviled egg. You know what? I think it just should bring you the Bloody Mary like in some kind of like sturdy glass, and then just set a plate on top of it with like all your garnishes. You just make your own and eat the rest. Nice. A doctor. Agreeable, thought-provoking impulse. That's a student. No surprises. Another student. Very interesting. A psychologist. Interesting to get to know something new. That's an information scientist. Now, it's interesting. This person is saying something new, whereas all the art industry and the artists were going like, same old crap. Interesting. Expensive. That's a physicist. I feel the contemporary movement is very difficult to analyze. I don't understand the banana truck or the acquisitions of the ruble collection. I must be old school. That's a sales manager. It is exciting to see what is presented here, and also sometimes annoying when the wish to shock is in the foreground. A therapist. There were many items that should not be considered as art. That's a radio moderator. And this final one, this is a translator. A brilliant fair with international flair. Extremely well organized, exciting galleries and artists. But the gastronomy concept is completely wrong. Bratwurst and raclette for an art public, and far too expensive into the bargain. So, yeah, it's a great art fair, but, you know, the bratwurst, boo. I mean, honestly, who cares what they have to eat? It's too expensive to buy. Druid, that sounds so good. So, a Bloody Mary with celery, shrimp, smoked bacon, olive, and a deviled egg. I love a drink that comes with a meal. That is so perfect. Now, this next section is called 100 Confessions. And this is kind of more of the same, but here's what it says. If one asks the visitors to the fair what significance art has for them personally, a cascade of exclamations flows into the lines provided by the interview sheet. So I think it sounds like they did like a, they passed out some kind of like, probably a card or something, like a comment card. So a lot of these things are just kind of over and over, but a mirror into my soul, a refined product of the human intellect, a sublime internal resonance, a way of understanding life, access to other levels of consciousness. Art can say something that I have trouble putting into words myself, a voice for the voiceless. Art filters what is seen and what is not seen, advances knowledge, is a lasting contribution to short lifespans. Art is a necessary expression for humans' emotional and spiritual well-being. Art is a spiritual being. Art is an intrinsic part of life. Without it, we would be nothing. It is one of the elements that makes us human. Art as expression. Art makes life beautiful, intimate, serious, shocking, and sad. Art is everything. Art is life. Life is art. It is a way of seeing, of enhancing one's senses to be receptive to the world. Art is life. Art is my soul food. Beauty. Beauty as a means of increasing awareness and sensitivity, becoming more awake and alive. Beauty, emotion, breath of life, cannot live without it. Culture, inspiration, deepest expression, discovery and pleasure, elevation of the spirit, emotion and pleasure, enhancement of life. I mean, I can go on. These things are alphabetically in here. Hey, Druid. Thank you for being my multi-language translator around here. And hello, Akiru. Hopefully I'm pronouncing it right. Well, I can tell you, Akiru, I speak nothing other than English, and very badly at that. Druid, my moderator, is a multi-linguist, so perhaps she can, I don't know how good her French is, but it is a pleasure to have you. We are talking about Art Basel. So I don't know if you are in Europe, assuming that you're speaking French. Perhaps you are in France, but maybe you're Canadian. I'm not sure, but very nice to have you here. So, I mean, again, think about everything that we've just said about how these people are like, it's overpriced. It's all about the money. It's same old, same old. And then we have people talking about what art means. And art means, it's my soul. It's, life. It's everything. It's, all this stuff is just how there is a major cognitive dissonance in trying to wrap my head around the fact that people are talking about art in a way I understand, of like, it's in your soul. Like, I make art because I have to as an artist. Yet what people are saying about Art Basel is there's not a lot of soul there. It's soulless. It's about money. So very big disconnect. Am I right? Let's see. Where's the next one? Okay, this one is called At the Center of the World of Pictures, the New Fetishes of the Art Scene. The fact that top prices can only be achieved with the works of a few artists of the post-war and contemporary periods is not a new phenomenon. So, we've already mentioned in previous streams about Robert Rauschenberg, de Kooning, like we get into the pop artists too, like Jasper Johns, of course, Claes Oldenburg, who I love. His sculptures are amazing. Of course, Warhol. And I mean, Warhol unto himself is a whole nother topic, but I'm sure Warhol like really leaned into, and probably right now would be super leaning into the Art Basel concept, because he was all about make money with art, even if it's garbage. That whole idea of just making series of art, and his studio assistants just cranking it out. He acknowledged that he was not making like high art. He was making, all that. So the division of the art market into a top segment and a broad middle sector existed in the past. Artists whose works achieved the highest prices were always a small minority, regardless of whether they were old masters, impressionists, or representatives of the classical modern period. What is, however, new since the 1980s is the growing occupation of this segment by contemporary art. Among the 200 most expensive lots in the auction market today, around 50 are works by living artists. Whoa, that's amazing. Akiru, we will be getting to spinning and weaving technology shortly. We had to cover this art and money junk first, and then I have some great videos to show. The cause for this trend should be sought not only in the changed structures of the art market or in the scarce supply of museal works alone. I'm assuming museal, M-U-S-E-A-L. I'm assuming he means art that was... I don't know. The artist had a muse? I don't know. Some of these words that people use, and again, this could be a translation thing because this was originally written in German. So the scarce supply of museal works alone, but also in the change of taste. For the rich bourgeoisie, contemporary art was for a long time scarcely attractive. The situation changed with the rise of pop art, or like I said, Warhol, in the 1960s. It made art popular among a public outside of the overseeable art world of the time, and at the same time provided the impulse for an extension of the field of art. So, pop art gets into, kind of the ideas of graphic design and surface design, which, we know very well today. But again, I think it goes back to is it art or not? Is it decorative, or is it, art, big A art? Okay, so we have two more things here that I wanted to talk about. So this one is the heading of this section is the norms and the rules, signs of disintegration in the world of values. What we have seen at the Art Basel differs, first of all, from all the experiences one can make during a typical walk around a gallery or around a museum or a visit to a gallery. The jostling crowds, the hot dog and drink stands call to mind the atmosphere of a fun fair. Even morphologically, its character as a fair can scarcely be denied. But although the specific separation of the visitors into the potential buyers on the intimate days. And if you remember, Art Basel, like the first day is only open by invitation. So that's those people coming in on the jet from the Emirates who somebody picks up with the chauffeured limousine and then takes them to the art fair. That's day one. Those are the people that come to day one. So the intimate days and the streaming masses of the ordinary public on the other days clearly reveals commercial features of a structural kind, and not the disinterested practice of exhibitions for all as in museums. And an added value is entered into the books here, which can only be realized through a particular good, namely the immaterial, the symbolic value of art. The customers are art lovers, and the visitors are interested in art. So apparently you can't be an art lover unless you have $100,000 to drop on a Damien Hirst piece of crap. Sorry, Damien Hirst, but I don't respect you much. We haven't even talked about Damien Hirst yet. But that's interesting, right? If you're just a person who goes to a museum, you're interested in art. But if you have a bunch of money to drop on a piece of art, then you're an art lover. Tisk, tisk. Okay, so I wanted to kind of just quickly talk about the research project that these 4 people did. Well, I'll just read the perspective. It says the publication presents the results of a research project which was launched with the help of a startup financing by the research committee of the University of St. Gallen, and they started in 2011. So, yeah, this is more than 10 years ago that they're talking about Art Basel. But again, I don't think it's changed much. You know, some of the things today, obviously, with in the United States, Miami Art Basel, of course, the prices of things are just astronomical and ridiculous. But yeah, I mean, this just, I think that this book really just kind of cemented for me. It put into real people's words, you know, what this world is about, this art world, this big A art world. And what do we do about it? I don't know that we do anything about it, right? I think that artists like me, you know, we continue at this like middle place where, you know, we try to get ourselves into galleries, try to get shows, but it's really at like a local level, you know, and the galleries I've been in, a couple of them are kind of big up their galleries, and I've been in some online stuff where there's the opportunity for a lot more people to see it, but you know, it's just, we're not talking about the same world. You know, it's the difference, like I said the other day, it's the difference between running down to DSW to buy myself a new pair of Adidas or flying to Paris to go to Prada and buy myself a pair of sneakers. Right? I would never do that because I'm going to wear my tennis shoes every day. I want something that's, you know, affordable, hard wearing, looks good with my clothes. Same thing with art. I want something that looks nice in my house. You know, that I care about what the artist has to say. I like their style. It speaks to me. Their artwork speaks to me. Like, those are the reasons why I want to buy art and look at art. I've never thought of art as an investment. I have a friend of mine, of ours, gave me and my husband an anniversary gift, probably been 10 or 15 years ago, of a very small piece of art, but it's by like a real artist. Now this guy probably does not rise to the level of like Art Basel artist, but he's nationally known and nationally represented. So I may one day die with one piece of art that's worth money. So anyway, all right, are you guys ready for some technology? Now, we have been, of course, reading The Heritage of Cotton by M.D.C. Crawford, and as we were reading the Industrial Revolution chapter, I was really trying to like wrap my head around the descriptions that Morris Crawford has in the book. And there are pictures. I did not show them. But what I thought would be better is if we just grab some videos. Now, Dee Marie, if you're here, she sent me this great video. It's a longer video. So we may or may not watch that. Let me see if I can find it real quick just to pull it up. Ah, I know I saved it here. Gosh darn it. I hate it when that happens. We'll have to look at that one later. It's a longer video. Ah, here we go. I think this might be it. Here we go. Yeah. So, yeah, I want to say this is like a longer video, but let me grab this one just in case. Actually, this might be one of the ones I grabbed. Okay. Sorry guys, I did have this. Okay, so this guy's in England. So we'll come back to him. So first of all, I wanted to show you. Let me go to my other screen. And I apologize for my my crappy YouTube. So this is, I told you guys about Thistle Hill Weavers, which is owned by Rabbit Goody. It is in Cherry Valley, which I think is New York. For some reason, I thought it was up in Vermont, but I think she's in New York. And I took a workshop from her at AQSG seminar back in the fall. And you know, she's not a quilter. She's in fact, I think she started off by telling us, I know nothing about quilts. You guys are going to hate me before I'm done here. But she weaves this incredible fabric. And this is a news story that I think will kind of summarize everything that you need to know about Rabbit Goody. And then we'll look at some specific types of technology that, but this shows a lot of her workshop. So,
was recently
leader.
The owner of a weave Valley was recently featured in Smithsonian Magazine. Her expertise in
does that sound good?
Preserving the past is why Hollywood has her on speed dial. Tonight, we're taking you inside Thistle Hill Weavers to introduce you to Rabbit Goody. Take a listen. Far from the glitz and glam of Hollywood, a small weaving mill in Cherry Valley is hard at work.
Being able to have the right period clothing or the right period props is essential to you believing a movie that's a period piece.
Rabbit Goody has built a career on her expertise and ability to create accurate historic reproductions of fabrics, carpet, and trim, working from blueprints from the past.
I have the ability to read weavers' drafts from the past. Weavers left recipes, okay? Just like cookbooks. And it looks like music if you don't know.
So I just have to stop here. I think what these are the like the weaver's instructions. So like the recipe card for the weavers. But I think what these are might be that punch card situation. And I do know in another one of the videos, it literally shows the little like, I don't know, like the little things that the punch cards sit on, I guess. And you can see those things like, I don't know how to describe it, but like how the different warp threads will be coming up and down based on the pattern. This kind of technology, when you're getting into the stuff that's like patterning and and weaving and not just the little over and under, this is where you get like early quote unquote computer technology. They base this understanding on like the yes no of weaving. So like, yes is up, no is down, over, under. They use that to represent, zeros and ones, which we know is binary code. So, this, again, quote unquote, ancient technology that started with strings like tied to rocks hanging from like a doorway, essentially, becomes this. And this is just so fascinating to me.
Know what you're looking at.
The commute is short for Rabbit. Thistle Hill Weavers is located on her farm.
Either if they're in the area and I say I'm a weaver, they say, what? Or a lot of people say, oh, do you work for Rabbit Goody? And I say yes, because half of the county knows of her.
For Rabbit, her passion lies in preserving the past, helping restore rooms in historic homes like Schuyler Mansion. Their work has been featured in more than 70 Hollywood films and TV shows.
We do a lot of fabric for clothing. Right now our fun one is we do Ahsoka's cloak for Disney.
Oh, I'm touching a Jedi cloak. I'm working on a Jedi cloak.
I'm not here to discuss my past.
Our fabric we made for the Mandalorian, for the character Ahsoka, that's when she's Ahsoka the gray, and then she gets a lighter Jedi cloak that we also made. And there's a lot of Star Wars nerds here, so we really appreciate.
So I had to pause on this one. This really surprised me because what I knew of what they did there was a lot of fabric, you know, like for sets like Bridgerton. And I'm not saying she's done stuff for Bridgerton, although I think she might have. But just think of all the history and the period productions. You know, Outlander and that kind of thing. Like all that stuff is so popular. And so I knew that she was doing weaving for things like that in Hollywood, as well as the reproductions of the things for colonial homes and well, older homes, whatever, the museums. But the fact she made this for The Mandalorian, I was like, that is so interesting to me because the Mandalorian's clothing does not have to be made out of like wool. It does not have to be, you know, it could be I mean, in theory, I'm just thinking like, I don't know why it couldn't have been like a synthetic or like just off the rack, but for whatever reason, you know, the costuming for, you know, the Mandalorian and Ahsoka's costume, they specifically wanted like a color and a drape. And so they consulted Thistle Hill, and I think that is so cool. You know, it's not just old stuff, but new stuff she's coming up with.
Appreciate it.
For Rabbit,
No
it's so
scissors.
much more than being able to see her work on the silver screen. It's not even about leaving her mark behind on the world. It's about retiring one day and knowing she weaved together a life she's proud of.
In Jewish, we say to be a mensch, to be thought of as a good person. It's nice, I love what I do, don't get me wrong, but nobody really needs it. I'm not a great artist. I'm a good technical weaver. I can pull things off. I'm a weaver by trade.
Okay. Fascinating, right? Okay, so that's generally what she did. Now we're moving on. This is called Heavy Metal Weaving, and it's by Longbow Media, but this is Rabbit's shop. And I'm actually going to turn the audio off because it's loud, and I don't think that there is any narration or speaking in here. It's just the machine, so I'm going to turn that off. But let me, while we're looking at this, I'll try to grab. Well, that might mess up. Yeah. I'll get you guys the links so that you can look at these on your own. So, I mean, look at this. How fast it goes when it's like really going. And like all of these bits and pieces. And these are old machines. So, okay, so here's the things that I think, those little knobs, I think those are like the... And then this big wheel thing that's the warp. She's making warp there. It is just amazing to me. And you know, those huddles are lifting the warp threads up as they need to be lifted. There she's spinning something. I mean, it's wild. Okay, she's making warp there. And she's connecting the little pedals, the heddle pedals. I don't know. I think Anon Maker may not be here today, but she knows all this stuff really well. Oh, she is speaking, so.
We rescued a lot of equipment over time from mills in America that were going out of business. They also brought truckloads of parts.
Yeah, there's
and
this
I
punch
have parts
part.
squirreled away in all sorts of places. So we get people in here who are fascinated by the gears and fascinated by the old machinery, who don't care at all about the fabric. And then we get people who care to the minutia that the fabric looks and feels and tastes and is as close to the historic as possible, but they don't care at all about the process. In America, we made very smart tools, and anybody could run them. It's a fantastic dynamic when you think of why America wanted to produce inexpensive goods for the masses as opposed to producing fewer goods at higher price for the very wealthy.
So I think it's interesting that she's talking about how, in the US we made these really great machines that could be operated by anybody. Yeah, but you also had to be trained, because you saw all the things she was doing. The warp going where it goes, and tying the pedals and the heddles and all that stuff. I mean, that's not something that you could teach somebody in a day. I think that people, even though we're not talking about somebody needs like a college education to run these machines, you still have to know what you're doing. So there's definitely skill in running these machines, even though they're supposedly simple machines.
There are very few mills that will do short runs and who will develop fabrics. We don't know from one minute to the next what order is going to come in the door. And I'm interested primarily in flat woven textiles, so domestic and interior textiles. I love trying to figure out how it was done in the past, and that keeps me going.
So very cool. What was I going to say there? I can't remember. Let's go on to the second heavy metal. So this one we just watched, I think was from 2012, 2011. It's been a while. This next one is much newer. I'll turn the audio off again because it's still noisy. But yeah, I mean, you can just see, like, this is not simple cloth she's weaving. This is some really, really, really beautiful, intricate stuff. And I actually have a scrap. I think I have 2 scraps from her looms. Oh, she's talking again.
Business. There are very few mills that will do short runs and who will develop fabrics.
Oh yeah, that's what I was going to say. So this idea of short runs, most mills, and there's not a whole lot of mills left in the U.S. I think there's probably more of these little cottage mills. Probably, I don't know the numbers, the statistics, but for the most part, a mill wants to be able to produce something, like a whole bunch of something for the economy of it, and then be able to sell all of that and be done with it. So like a run. Whereas she's saying, like, I think she has some limits. Like, she's not going to like design and make you like a yard of fabric, but say 50 yards of fabric or 100 yards of fabric, whatever. That's not the thousands and thousands that they want, in a regular commercial mill. So she's willing to do these smaller runs, and there's not a lot of mills that will do that because it's just not economical for them. So you could see where the historical homes, that they might have some grant money for, making reproductions or for restoring or replacing something. They would have grant money to do that and could work with her. Movies obviously have big budgets, movie and TV. So they can afford these short runs. So, it's so interesting to me that she is catering to like this very broad range of people with these really, really, really specific needs.
That we weave here that nobody weaves today.
That's beautiful.
I want to understand how something came into being and understand the process that made it that way, and how close I can come to repeating that process, or at least understanding the process. I want to produce the best possible quality I can and employ people in a reasonable job.
It's just, it's just amazing to me. And I wonder how these people have not gone deaf in there. I don't see any of them wearing ear protection. I'm like, it's noisy in there. There's a drawing where I don't know if they're, I guess maybe she's woven all of these. carpet. Oh my goodness. Yeah, I think she might do carpets too. She's doing carpets too. So, all right, let's jump to the next one. Okay, so this is the stuff that we talked about the other day that I was trying to figure out from the spinning stuff. And I think that there's a couple of different spinning Jenny videos here that I think will be helpful to understand.
Guide at Monticello, and I also make.
Okay.
My name is Charles Morrill. I'm a guide at Monticello, and I also make things. So this machine is for spinning thread from raw fiber, from wool, from cotton, and probably other things as well. And here's how it works. You've got all this unspun roving right here. What happens is it'll get clamped down here like this, and then the operator will turn the wheel. All of these 24 spindles will spin at once. And the roving will come up to the top of each spindle and then flick off. As the spindle goes around, the roving flicks off, flicks off, flicks off again and again and again, countless times. And each time it flicks, you get another spin, and then this gets stronger and stronger and stronger. Then what happens is you move this faller rod down, and that will push the woven thread off the top of the spindle so that you can actually wind it right up on the spindles. And you'll wind it right up, then unlock the carriage, and then come back for more roving, and the process begins again. So it's not continuous.
So if you remember, we read what Morris Crawford wrote. It sounded like, because he was talking about how it was, tension was put on it and it was spun, and then the tension was taken off and it was wound. And this is what he's describing. And I think it made sense to me in my mind, but I couldn't exactly articulate that. But this I feel like makes it make sense. So hopefully this is making sense for you guys.
It is stop, start, a little of this and a little of that.
What an interesting machine, right? Okay, so that was from Monticello. This is another one I thought was really good.
Before big spinning machines, there were spinning wheels. Thread was made by hitching and twisting wool or cotton on the spindle of a spinning wheel. This thread could be woven into cloth to make a pair of pants, a dress, or socks. The spinning wheel worked well, but it was tedious and took a lot of time. In 1764, a man named James Hargreaves invented a machine that could spin yarn and thread much faster. In fact, it could do it 8 times as fast because it had 8 spindles instead of just 1. This invention was called the spinning jenny. Since the cotton business was booming at the time, speeding up the spinning process made it possible to weave more cloth in a much shorter amount of time. Because of the success of the spinning jenny and several other textile inventions, many clothing factories were built in the New England area. These factories gave jobs to workers in the area and offered Americans quality fabrics for a cheaper price.
The spinning wheel increased spinners' output. But it wasn't until 1764, when Lancastrian James Hargreaves had a brainwave, that spinners could really step up production. His invention was the spinning jenny. The spinning jenny worked on the same principle as the spinning wheel. Here we have the rovings.
So I don't know if he just really, really, really looks like him, and people mention this in the comments. I think this is Arthur Weasley. I think this is the guy that played Arthur Weasley in Harry Potter. Somebody mentions it in the comments, and I'm like, is it just a guy that looks like him, or is it him? I don't know, but I just had to mention that.
The unspun cotton, and that's thread on there, and this is how we get it. I pull him back, we pull off the bobbin here, okay? And then we trap it between those 2 pieces of wood there. So this now is stationary. This spindle at the end is connected to all the other ones, which are connected to this wheel. And as we wind this wheel, it's quite a knack this, but you'll see it comes off the spindle like that, and as it flicks off the top, it's putting a spin into the roving. And because the rest of it's stationary, it's clamped here, and this isn't moving, it's spinning. Okay.
Yeah, I don't think this guy is really Arthur Weasley, but I don't know. This one, and then the one that they showed just before that, the woman, it looked like the thing was down like flat, whereas this one and the Monticello one, the crank is up. So they look just slightly different, but it's the whole concept of them, winding up these little spindles, and then as it gets to the top, it's got enough twist in it, and then it can be spun together. Now, part 2 is that you take 2 of these threads and you spin them together. And so I'll show this one in a minute. I want to show this whole video. This woman, I watched her video this morning. She grew the cotton, spun the cotton, and wove the cotton. And I'm like, 2 thumbs up to you, lady. I really love what she did. So we're going to look at hers in a second. But I wanted to also show you a couple of other things. So we mentioned the Indian Sharka. Now, I don't think that Crawford gave the name Sharka, but he talked about the Indian spinning wheels. And so I wanted to show you what a Sharka looks like, because it's really interesting. All of this stuff, this giant stuff, wheels and stuff. Now look at the Sharka, or Charka. It's called a book Sharka because it's in a little... I love this. This is so fascinating. I turned the audio off on that too. But yeah, the very first time I saw one of these, somebody using it, I was like, oh, it must come out and you like build it. It lays flat in this little case. There's no audio to this one, by the way. She's just showing. And I want to say that's called drafting. When you're pulling a little thread out of your roving. The roving is the kind of chunk. Isn't that interesting? And it's just that little itty bitty box. Let's see. Let's look at this one. I don't think I looked at this one.
Spinning takes place in 1769.
Okay, this has got pictures in it.
The most important step from hand to machine spinning takes place in 1769. When Richard Arkwright improves the spinning jenny, he replaces the manual operation of the spindles by water power. This new way of energy input gives the machine its name, the water frame. The thread is twisted faster, stronger, and more evenly. For the first time in history, a machine produces high-quality yarn automatically, and over 3 times more as the thread-operated spinning wheel. In 1779, Samuel Crompton combines the principle of the spinning jenny and the water frame. By adding the spinning jenny's pull-out carriage to the drawing frame of the water frame, he creates a hybrid. For that reason, he names his machine the spinning mule. Crompton's invention improves the yarn production not only...
So I think that Morris, he described this, the mule coming after the spinning jenny and how it, it took on like a secondary ability, with production, and that it combined those two technologies. At the very beginning, that sketch, I'm pretty sure that's one of the identical sketches that's in the book. So we'll look at that real quick before you start reading. But that is huge. That's a lot of yarn, or thread, yarn, whatever, being made.
Quantitatively, but also qualitatively, by the production of finer and stronger yarn. The first universal spinning machine can move up to 50 spindles simultaneously.
Fascinating. So I think that is, oh, okay. So now let's look at this lady.
Hi, guys.
So again, and there's a little part in here where she has I might hurry through it because she has a little bit of problem with her crop. We'll see who it was responsible for damaging her crop. But yeah, this is so interesting that she did this. I love this.
This is Megan with Luthvarian Fiber Arts, and today I'm going to show you a magic trick. So first, nothing up my sleeves, and what I have here is a white square of cloth. And here's the magic trick. I made this cloth from dirt. You see, this is cotton that I grew in my own garden. And today I'm going to show you the process that it took to turn that cotton into a piece of fabric.
So this is what the cotton plant looks like. I'm going to turn the audio off. So this is what the cotton plant looks like. And I've seen these. Totally recognize these. But look at the flowers. As many times as I've driven through North Carolina where they grow cotton, I have not once that I can remember seeing cotton flowers. And I remember somebody in here who was like, oh yeah, the cotton flowers are really pretty. Chill. No, I'm not ready to grow cotton because I seriously, brown thumbs, that cotton doesn't have a chance. But this is interesting. See, that's the bowl. That's the cotton boll formation. And I'm like, what does it look like in there? What's inside there? Okay, this is the disaster. And you see there's like the cotton is broken, like what's happened here. And the culprit, I can't remember, she shows the culprit. There it is. A squirrel got into her cotton. So let's get that. Look at the mess it made. So we'll skip over this. And it's pretty funny. Oh, she puts a fake snake in there. And then she puts paper bags over the cotton. Okay, so go back to... So apparently she brings it inside to dry it. You have to dry, the cotton has to be dried for it to pop open. So now you see what we recognize. And it looks like she dried it in her food dehydrator. And I've shown this before. You guys have seen this before. And I like how she has this nice, neat way of taking the seeds out. And I'm just like, rip, rip, rip. She, of course, is making thread or yarn. I'm making batting. She's got fancy cards. I just have those little tiny cruddy ones. I would very much like a pair of these, but they're a little pricey. But you can make a big sheet of batting with that. She's going to do something here that's really interesting. It's a little bit different than how you would pull wool. It's like if you're just pulling wool off, you can kind of roll it off with the other thing or with your hand. Here, she's using these, I guess they're dowel rods. And you can see how she's, I guess because you can't really get at this tight roll with just your hands. You have to use an implement. And then you see she's pulling them out. And then that's the cotton roving. A little bit different than wool roving. So I thought that was interesting. Yeah, this is still just music. So that she's got a little, this is a little spinning thing she's got. It looks like it's got some electronic aspects to it. So she's drafting there. And I mean, you could see, like, see how thin you have to get it. It's very easy to like pull it too hard. You have to get this like rhythm with how tightly you pull it. And that's what spinners are good at. Just kind of knowing, okay, now here's the part where she's going to twine it. So she's got 2 spools, and then this thing twists them together. And I think what's important to know about when you do that, you know, you're twining the 2 together, and you can twine like 3. You can, I mean, it doesn't have to just be 2. You can twine a bunch of things together. When you twine them, you're spinning them in the opposite direction that you originally spun, so that it locks itself together. It's the difference between I believe an S twist and a Z twist is the direction that they twist. So now I love her little loom. I guess this is a tabletop loom. It's pretty small. But Ashford, I could see the name. Ashford is a big name in weaving. What she's doing there is she's doing the warp. And I do know, if you notice when Rabbit Goody was doing warp, because she was doing really long lengths, they put it around like that big wheel, or you might see these like kind of zigzag posty things that you'd wrap it on, and then, you know, it's you're creating very long pieces of warp without having to like run a mile. It's, you know, it's shortening the distance you have to go with these really long pieces of warp. And this is very tedious. You know, threading all that warp through there, you know, in bunches, and creating the right over and under, you know. Look, I think hers is just going to be like a plain even weave over and under, you know, over one, under one. But if you're going to do some type of complex pattern like Rabbit Goody was, you have multiple heddles that will come up and raise the warp yarns in different, you know, different ones at different times. So, you know, she's weaving in her ends here. Yeah, I guess. And then she's going to cut it off. Cutting it is probably the most, the thing that I'm just like, oh, don't cut it. It was so hard to make.
Hey, thanks for watching. As always, guys, if you like what you see, go ahead and...
Okay, so I'll share her link, and then I'll share Rabbit Goody's link. So if you guys want to go and look at those, so that's hers. And then for some reason, Rabbit Goody has 2 channels. Yeah, where's the share thing? Here we go. But yeah, go back and look at these, and you know, follow them. It, you know, it makes a difference when you follow people. And I'll do the Monticello one too.
My name is Charles Morrill.
Because I know you'll find lots more fun stuff here. And then when I put this out on YouTube, I'll put all of the links in there from this, or I'll put this channel in there, or this, what's the word I'm looking for? This playlist. All right. So back to me. So did that clarify things a little bit? I hope. Now let us look at the pictures. And I don't know that the pictures are gonna be better than what you just looked at, but nonetheless, you can kind of see these different, and I think this and be this one, were kind of what was illustrated in that one video. So I'm not going to read the details about all these things, but you can, as you can see, these are the things we've been talking about. Yeah, these are, so we've got the stuff that's, you know, Leonardo da Vinci's, the fly spinning device, and yeah, John Kay, Samuel Crompton, Arkwright, and Hargreaves. There are our big names. All right. So you ready to finish off this chapter? And then I think that the machine age in the United States is a short chapter I think we'll be able to get to today because maybe. We'll see. I hate stopping in the middle of these chapters, but I'm sorry. It's cotton in the colonies. The machine age in the U.S. is the long one. Okay. So I'm going to pick up where I left off, and if you just as a reminder, this is the 18th century. This is chapter 9, 18th century, the age of the machine. This is just the last couple pages. And as a reminder, we are reading The Heritage of Cotton by M.D.C. Crawford, or Morris de Camp Crawford. We have discovered he's an interesting man. He wrote this book in 1924. And so this is where we left off. The distressing human conditions, the unquestioned falling away of standards of merchandise, produced under the first generation of the machine, drew a bitter protest from intellectual England, a revision of the electoral system, a vast migration to the colonies, and the modern labor union. This period is in truth the beginning of the modern economic system, and the works of Robert Owen, Thomas Carlyle, William Morris, and John Ruskin may again be read with great profit and perhaps a broader understanding. But in their own time, they were prophets, crying in vain in the midst of a wilderness of mechanical greed. It is not to be expected that the United States escaped some share of these evils. Oh, the United States had a huge share of these evils. But in this country, we were not hampered by a rigid ownership of land. And as one class of labor grew dissatisfied, it was possible to replace it with another, until the present population of our great textile towns in New England is composed of a rather dubious mixture of most of the races of the Near East and Southern Europe. Okay. Putting aside consideration of the human element, this period of development shows the English-speaking people at their very highest point of efficiency. Endless patents were taken out. There was improvement in practice and theory almost from day to day. But during this period, only 3 machines deserve mention alongside of the great inventions of the former century. These are the ring frame, invented in 1832, the jacquard pattern loom, and the draper loom. So the ring frame, I think, is like this, and I think it is for for weaving things in the round, but I think it's specifically for stockings. It's almost more of a knitting frame, so I could be wrong about what he's talking about, but I think that's what he's talking about. And then of course the jacquard pattern loom, of course, are the fancy patterns where you create, by floating the weft over the warp, you create these beautiful patterns. And it's got like a reverse look on the back side because of how the threads go through. So, okay, why don't I just keep reading? The mule of Crompton, even in its present form, requires an expert mechanic to operate it. Besides, the movement is intermittent. As the carriage runs out, the yarn is spun. As it recedes, the yarn is wound upon the spindle. So we saw that. Pull it out, and then you pull it in, and you can wind it up, and you wind it up. So it's just doing that drafting mechanically. Hence, only half of the time is spent in actual spinning. The ring, on the other hand, is a continuous motion. Okay, so this is not the same thing I was thinking of. Mechanical greed, right? I mean, I think that's what can be said of the Industrial Revolution is mechanical greed. So yes, it sounds like I'm thinking of the wrong thing with the ring frame. I think that's more of a knitting machine, I guess. So the ring, on the other hand, is a continuous motion. For many years, it was thought that the mule spun yarns, especially in the finer numbers. The mule spun yarns, especially in the finer numbers, were superior to those made on the ring. Nor has this idea been entirely abandoned. Yet there is a growing belief that the ring has great possibilities for quality as well as quantity. Let's see if is there a picture of that. Because now I'm second guessing myself on what I think this is. No, there's no picture. Is there a picture in the U.S. one? Let us see. No. There is nothing that tells us what the ring frame looks like. We will have to find out, I guess. The ring frame was a distinctly American machine invented by Mr. Jenks of Pawtucket, Rhode Island, and for many years the British manufacturers scorned it. It was popular in America, however, because it could be operated successfully up to a certain point by unskilled labor and was particularly suited to the introduction in parts of the country where there were no large bodies of skilled labor to draw from. The Northrop loom, with its automatic shuttle feed, was invented by a British mechanic employed in the Draper Loom Works in Hopedale, Massachusetts in 1898. It is but fair to say that this invention owes much to the encouragement given by the Draper organization to the inventor and the constant improvements made in the details of construction in types of shuttles, etc., since it was first brought out. In the type of loom which preceded the Draper type, there was only a single bobbin of weft. Okay. The weaver had to stop the loom and replace this with a new one each time it ran out. Since the loom runs at the rate of 100 to 200 picks of weft per minute, it will be seen that in a mill of thousands of looms, there was a considerable loss of valuable time. Okay, so something that can operate really fast, but your spindle's going to run out. So you're going to have to keep putting a new one in. I mean, I always think of it, it's like a cash register. Like you're scanning really fast and the receipt's coming out and then you're like, oh, I'm going to have to put another roll of tape in there. Let's see. The Northrop loom has a battery of weft bobbins, and as the bobbin in the shuttle runs out, an automatic device inserts and threads a new one without stopping the movement of the loom. Well, that's a game changer, obviously. The principal economy of this loom lies in the fact that with good yarn, a weaver can take care of a greater number of looms than formerly. It is unquestionably one of the most nearly perfect of all automatic machines. As in the case of the ring, this invention was at first disliked in England, but today it has won its place in the British textile mills making plain fabrics, and a factory has been built in the Midlands to make the English type of Northrop loom. Well, this of course being 1924, my guess is that Northrop looms are no longer operating in England, having been moved overseas, as much of this has happened in our country. As I have suggested, the machine age was not wholly responsible for the destruction of the individualized craft expression of the Guild Ages. The Guild Ages were destroyed once the principle of the division of labor and specialization in phases of production was established. So, and we've mentioned over and over that started with the Industrial Revolution. Henry Ford came in and made it even more effective. The machine was rather the result of this process than its cause. That did not stop the saboteurs from breaking all the machines. The fine traditions of the Middle Ages, themselves built perhaps upon the Eastern craft arts brought back by the Crusaders, were destroyed or rather buried by the deluge of merchandise uncontrolled by these traditions, following the discovery of the all-water route to the Orient. The merchant, rather than the manufacturer, was responsible. All of our artistic losses may, however, easily be reclaimed. Beauty of pattern, richness of color, true aesthetic values are always within the reach of an appreciative audience. Each age and people always get the art they deserve, and I had almost So each age of people always get the art they deserve. I had almost written desire. I guess, okay. So each age of people always get the art they desire. No, he's saying deserve. Okay. All right, Morris. But the influence of our methods of production, the personal detachment from creation, the loss of individuality, apparently inseparable from this phase of industry, is another matter far more difficult to estimate, control, or modify. We may rely on the advancement of taste to restore us some measure of skilled crafts based upon the fine traditions of ornament, and even a vast improvement in machine-made fabrics. But the problem of educating our factory population to an understanding of their relationship to production and to life in general, to restore to them the fine joy of creative effort, is a problem that we must take up with patient seriousness before we breed conditions of discontent impossible of solution through mere economic formulas. Indeed, Morris, indeed. Okay. So that was an interesting chapter. Now, I think we have time. I think we'll be able to get through it because this is only a few pages. Cotton in the colonies. So this is chapter 10, Cotton in the colonies. I'm sure we're going to get into some painful stuff here, is my guess. Maybe not. I don't know. We'll see. All right. Chapter 10, Cotton in the colonies. Within the present boundaries of our Atlantic seaboard cotton states and in the valley of the Mississippi, cotton was unknown until introduced by the European colonists. There is an account of cotton blankets being objects of trade between the powerful tribes at the mouth of the Mississippi and the Pueblo tribes of New Mexico. But the plant was a stranger to this region, now famous as the world's greatest cotton plantation. Its first introduction is said to have been due to Spanish agency. Spanish agency. That's an interesting word to use. In about 1536, Spanish colonists in Florida are reputed to have planted cotton seeds. In this, there is nothing improbable, since the Spanish governors had long since made use of native labor. So, yes. And they're enslaving the natives, and he's calling this Spanish agency. Now, Morris, tisk tisk. He has overwhelmingly been, I think, very, I guess, on the right side of history and how he explains most things. I think there's been a few things where I've been like, Morris, you're a product of your time. But we might be glossing over some horrors here. Okay. So the Spanish had long since made use of native labor and may have hoped to find the fierce warriors of the mainland as tractable as the gentle inhabitants of the islands. Ugh, roll my eyes. All right. Cotton lint was already an article of trade between the Spanish and Portuguese colonies in Europe. As early as 1570, the cottons of Brazil were regularly sold in the market of Ulm in southern Germany. Now that's interesting. So yeah, and it's funny, I don't remember him talking about Brazil a whole lot. He talked a lot about Peru. So that's interesting. Although I do know Sven Beckert in this enormous book, my poor tiny wrist. So in the Empire of Cotton, the modern one, we know that Sven Beckert talked about a whole bunch of independent outpost of cotton production across the globe. So, at the time of the first settlement in Virginia in 1606, the British East India Company had been formed 6 years, and cotton was well known in England. Consequently, the colonists brought with them cotton seeds, since they had been informed it would grow in their new homes as well as in Italy. It was hoped that supplies of raw materials might be raised for the home market, or at least enough for the domestic needs of the colonists. In the light of the latter importance of cotton, both in England and America, these earliest beginnings have been magnified in most works on the subject. As a matter of fact, there were no prophets at that time who foresaw either England's great industrial need for cotton 2 centuries later, or America's preeminence in raising the fiber. Quite the reverse was the case. Tobacco, Indian corn, lumber, and even silk were of greater importance. And what I can tell you here in Maryland, centrally, kind of just south of me, tobacco was huge, 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 huge until the late 1700s, when some Quakers from Pennsylvania came down and they established a little town called Ellicott City. They're the Ellicott brothers. And they convinced the local farmers here, stop growing tobacco. It's stripping the soil. Switch it out with cotton. And they changed a lot of what was happening here. And they ended up with flour mills. I'm sorry. They changed it out with wheat. I'm sorry. Switched the tobacco out with wheat. And so they had flour mills. They had lumber. And then later on, there was very small little bit of production in Maryland, but most of it was down in Virginia. So, and in the Carolinas. The Carolinas ended up becoming huge cotton production places and cotton mills, all the way up until mid to late 20th century when, and then all that stuff went overseas. So, tobacco and corn were really big business here until cotton showed up. It is true that taxes and cotton lint were accepted in the Carolinas, but a special law was passed in Virginia levying a fine of 10 pounds on any colonist owning 10 acres of land who did not plant 10 mulberry trees. This is silk, and silk is problematic. I don't think they've ever been able to raise silkworms very well here in the U.S. Special bounties were offered in tobacco to encourage silk raising in 1657. A small reeling plant was erected in Savannah in 1732, and in 1759, 10,000 pounds of cocoons were brought there to be thrown in silk thread. And so the reeling, I think, is where they soak the cocoons and then they start reeling off the silk fiber, the silk thread. Now, this I didn't know. I knew that they had tried in the South to raise silkworms, but they don't really take to this environment. On the other hand, no cotton was shipped from our colonies to England until late in the 18th century. So, yeah, you have, this big, homegrown cotton in the U.S. Clothing was one of the chief problems of our early settlers, and few indeed could afford the luxury of imported garments or cloth. Encouragement, therefore, was given by colonial legislatures and governors to the raising of sheep, flax, and to a lesser degree of cotton for home uses. Almost every farm, even as far north as New Jersey and Pennsylvania, raised small patches of the fiber. That this supply in time was not adequate is proven by the fact that even in early colonial times, a considerable supply of raw cotton was imported from the British West Indies and perhaps even from forbidden Spanish ports. Our ancestors, in the main, came from the artisan classes of Europe, and among them was naturally a sprinkling of skilled weavers and a certain knowledge of dyeing. Of course, every woman of that day knew how to spin, and the old Saxony wheel was a familiar object in every home. Yes, indeed, lots of artisans came, to seek, their futures here in the quote-unquote New World. We also had ye old prison boats coming. And I would suspect most of my Scots-Irish ancestors were not skilled weavers, but rather were coming on ye old prison boat. But nonetheless, we did have people settling here who knew what they were doing as far as the weaving and the dyeing and the spinning and whatnots. Even today, in the older parts of the United States, there are evidences of colonial craftsmanship. In sections of the Kentucky and Carolina hills, a vestige of this loom art remains, containing patterns which first originated perhaps in the Far East. Now, my guess, Kentucky and Carolina hills, he's talking about Appalachia. It is an art well worthy of encouragement. In New England, there was a strong beginning in the early 18th century of the splendid Elizabethan embroideries. The Dutch of the Hudson Valley produced coverlets of blue and white flax and wool, and may even have used cotton. These coverlets are, in point of texture and design, to be considered as serious expressions of textile art. The Pennsylvania Germans were not only skilled weavers, but introduced block printing in blue and white patterns, a familiar craft in their European homes since the early 14th century. The prevalence of this art in Pennsylvania may have been one of the reasons which induced Benjamin Franklin in 1753 to establish a British printer of calico in Philadelphia. There are more or less veracious accounts, excuse me, more or less veracious, and he means Veracious, meaning I think accurate or factual, not voracious like nom 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 voracious. There are more or less veracious accounts of attempts of the British soldiers during the Revolution to capture this man, so prejudicial to British trade in this country. So the British, the redcoats, were like, give us back our calico printer. We need to take him back to England. The problem of the colonial textile workers in color was, of course, very difficult. But these early craftsmen were not lacking in an investigative spirit and turned to the natural products of the soil for their dyes, aided maybe by the example of the Indians. Goldenrod, sassafras, gallberry, horse laurel, iris root, hickory, red oak, and walnut barks are but a few of the substances they used to obtain color. And as I was about to say, and indigo, but there's a whole thing about that, and he's about to say it. At a very early date, indigo was imported and later raised in this country, and it was highly raised in South Carolina, the eastern part of South Carolina, where they had lots of rice, and they had indigo. Quaint and interesting as these colors and patterns would appear to our eyes today, they did not bear comparison with either the prints of Europe or the beautiful calicos of India. And we very early began to hear of commerce in these luxuries, especially when the New England mariners began to make voyages to the east, or to ports where these forbidden commodities were obtainable. An advertisement of Benjamin Franklin offering a reward for the return of a calico dress stolen from his wife proves both the existence of this commerce and indicates that fine cotton dresses in rich colors were both highly prized and very rare. The old dock in Salem, Massachusetts, where the tall ships once moored from their voyages to the seven seas, is still, for all its departed grandeur and lost romance, known as India Wharf, as a reminiscence of the time when cargoes of calico were received and exchanged for cargoes of the salt cod so famous in this section of the world. So I am curious, I don't know if Jill is still around, but is it still called India Wharf in Salem, Massachusetts, as it was in 1924? It is, of course, easy to exaggerate the importance of the colonial arts, and there is a natural confusion with the products of later times, and even with the materials of purely European origin. Infant colonies struggling for life in a hostile wilderness are scarcely the proper setting for the gentler arts. Still, we must remember that for almost 2 centuries our growth was stationary, and in our colonial life, therefore, there was a period of security, stability, and leisure, in which the modest crafts might well ripen and develop. With the dawning of the age of machinery and the sudden awakening of that restlessness of spirit which swept our boundaries between 2 mighty oceans, all of these kindlier, homelier matters were brushed aside, awaiting the return of peaceful days. Okay. I mean, all right. Even these modest beginnings of domestic crafts met with small favor in England. I guess he's really kind of romanticizing this idea of the colonies, and we have a different look at the early colonial America these days. I think that my guess is Williamsburg probably does a really good job of talking about this stuff today in 2025. Even these modest beginnings of domestic crafts met with small favor in England. Colonies, in the plan of things, were outland centers of population created to supply the home market with raw material and to be in turn a market for the finished products of the mother country. All kinds of manufacturing were therefore looked upon with disfavor, and amiable colonial governors were instructed to frown severely on the beginnings of our infant industries. That this policy, however, had little effect on our ancestors is amply attested by the steady increase of the cottage arts and the small shipments of raw cotton to Great Britain. There is no record of cotton shipped to England from the present limits of the United States until 1764, when 8 bags of perhaps 100 weight each are mentioned. And either he talked about this early, or it was in, I'm trying to remember, it might have been in MacGyver Percival's Chintz book, where he was talking about, yeah, I'm drawing a blank. I've read too many of these things, but yeah, I remember reading about this, how we've got these increasing number of raw cotton bales going over to England. So that was 1764, 8 bags, perhaps 100 weight each. In 1770, 3 bales of 200 pounds each were shipped from New York, 10 from Charleston, and 3 barrels of lint seed from South Carolina. When it is recalled that this was well within the age of invention, and that the British consumption at the time was over 4 million pounds annually, it will be seen that our cotton was of little importance to the hungry spindles of Lancashire. At this time, 70% of their wants were supplied from the British West Indies and perhaps from the Spanish colony of Louisiana. Just after the Revolution, a British frigate captured an American vessel and confiscated 10 bales of cotton of 200 pounds each, on the charge that no such vast amount of lint could have come from this region and must therefore represent contraband trade from the West Indies or the Spanish ports of the Caribbean Sea. Another reason why cottons played so small a part in our early agriculture and commerce lies in the new character of the plant developed under cultivation above the frost area. The first cotton seeds were brought from India, the Levant, and the West Indies, even from far-off Siam. In these regions, the plant is naturally of the perennial variety, growing more like a tree than a shrub. Treble! It was quickly discovered that the least touch of frost destroyed the plant and made it necessary to replant each year. So that makes sense, I mean, just in terms of, geographic temperatures and climate. Now, it's interesting to me, I mean, even down, like, say, in North Carolina, South Carolina, where if they harvest cotton, unless you're hand picking it, which is very rare these days, when they harvest mechanically, they just rip all the plants out. So this idea of perennial cotton is quite interesting. I mean, I think you would literally have to grow it on your own to have perennial cotton, because that just does not exist in any kind of farming, agricultural farming. So they're having to replant each year. This led to confusing mixture of types, and since cotton is notably sensitive to cross-fertilization, many curious botanical changes took place. The upland types of cotton of our Atlantic seaboard states, which became in time the dominant type all through our cotton area, differs from the Indian types and those which prevail in Brazil and the islands of the Spanish Main. I remember we talked about like the Sea Isle cotton, and then there's that really fine brown cotton that they have in South America. I think that was Peruvian, and it's very short staple, very difficult to spin, but very beautiful. The American cotton lint adheres so tenaciously to the seed, indeed, I know this from doing it, so tenaciously to the seed that it could not be ginned by the gentler method of the roller gin or churga of India. So that one, I know I've seen, it's 2 rollers, and when you crank it, you're literally pushing the cotton between these 2 rollers and it's squeezing the seed out. That doesn't work with like the cotton I got from North Carolina. That would not work, because it is just it's in there. It's like the difference between a cling peach and a freestone peach. A freestone peach, you'll pluck that seed right out, but the cling peach, oh Lord, try to get a seed out of a cling peach without just tearing the peach apart. Same thing with the cotton seed. So consequently, all our earlier cottons had to be pulled from the seed by hand. And since labor, even of enslaved people in the New World, was scarce and high, this excluded our This excluded our cottons from world markets and reserved it solely for domestic purposes. Okay, so have to hand remove it because the way they do it in India didn't work. The invention of the cotton gin by Eli Whitney was a characteristic Yankee answer to this enigma. It marks rather the beginning of the modern history of cotton in the United States than a later phase of the first beginnings. This invention did not occur until the first decade of our national existence, and many matters of interest preceded it in the growth of our cotton industry. And that is the end of Cotton in the Colonies. And amazingly, he got by with only mentioning slavery once, which really shocks me. I guess he's not really going to get into some of that, I don't know, machine age in the U.S. Looks like it's a lot of the mills. So somehow maybe Crawford got away without getting too much into slavery. Now, I do know Sven Beckert. He definitely, talks about the global trade in slavery and how it impacted cotton production, at least here in the quote-unquote New World. I know that he starts off right away, war, capitalism, and that kind of stuff. So, like I said, he's got a much more modern view of, what we know because, history. we keep learning more and we can update our history, whereas Morris is only dealing with what we knew up until 1924. So I still have to say I think Morris did a pretty good job with this book. Real quick, I'll show you the picture in here from the U.S. and this is not terribly interesting, really. It's just showing some coverlets, Dutch coverlets, calicos, and stuff. So, the pictures. Again, it's always nice to see the stuff in color if we can. So we've got MoMA, U.S. National Museum. Do you guys know what that is? The U.S. National Museum? I'm not sure what that is. All right. Well, I somehow managed to end us just on time. Again, I don't know if Jill's still here. I need to ask her if we can do Am I the A-hole on Thursday? So we can have a little fun with that. And yeah, wasn't it good timing, Druid? So our next chapter will be chapter 11, which is the machine age in the U.S. and the growth of the cotton plantation. Okay, so this maybe he gets into talking about plantations. Yeah, I think this is where, yeah, he's talking about slave labor. So yeah, this is where we kind of get into the maybe the icky attitude of the way things were in 1924 versus now. So, like I said, I hope you'll join me and Jill tomorrow for the beginning of this book, tomorrow night on Quilt Nerding YouTube channel. If not, I hopefully will see you on Thursday. And like I said, we'll do Am I the A-hole? If Jill's not available, I will find something else for you. But one thing, you know what? I wonder if I can give you guys this playlist. Probably not. Well, like I said, I gave you a couple links. I will do a better job of this playlist and add the links, including the one that DeMarie gave us because it's a good one. It's a longer one, but it's from a cotton mill that shows all of the detailed stuff. So with that, I think we're probably right in the middle of an ad break, but I hope you guys have a wonderful week. I hope, here's hoping that we don't have any more craziness nationally here. Oh yeah, VFD, thanks. I'm glad it was interesting. I love that. Yeah. So let's hope forest fire stuff, wildfires die down and, LA can get back to rebuilding, Southern California, get back to rebuilding. Knock on wood, the snow, the hurricane, everything. Let's have a not terrible week. Druid. Oh, you cracked me up. That was funny. I forgot I had those. I think they weren't working for a while. So, yes. Thank you for ending us on a laughing note. All right, guys, take care. As always, thank you so much. I couldn't do this without you. I wouldn't want to do this without you. So, I'll see you soon. Mwah! Bye, guys.